Imagine standing in your garage, staring at the one thing your husband loved more than anything else, and realizing you might have to let it go. That's where I was 3 months after burying him, my hands on the hood of his deep blue '69 Mustang fastback, the paint still glistening under a layer of dust, the smell of oil and leather wrapping around me like his old embrace. Only, when I opened the glove box to clear it out for the buyer, what I found inside nearly sent me to my knees. If you've ever been blindsided by someone you thought you knew better than anyone else, you'll understand the mix of shock, grief, and rage that's about to unfold. If stories like this resonate with you, go ahead and hit that like button, share, subscribe, and stay until the end, because what I discovered in that glove box didn't just change how I saw my husband, it changed everything. My name is Lydia Carter. I'm 54 years old, a high school guidance counselor in Fayetteville, North Carolina. I've spent the better part of my life helping teenagers figure out who they want to be, while quietly feeling like my own identity was, well, optional. I married Tom Carter when I was 24. He was 10 years older, already well established as a contractor who could walk into any room and command it without raising his voice. People liked Tom. Men wanted to work with him. Women noticed him. We were married for almost 30 years, and like most long marriages, we had our share of quiet wars and unspoken truces. But there's something about death that has a way of airbrushing over the rough edges. People stand at a funeral, eulogizing a saint, and you're left wondering if you lived in the same house as this man they're describing. Tom passed away in early March, a sudden heart attack on a chilly morning while he was out in that Mustang. I was the one who found him slumped over the steering wheel in the driveway. That image, it's stitched into my mind, whether I want it there or not. The weeks after his funeral blurred into each other. People stopped calling, the casseroles dried up. My daughter Kelsey, who lives up in Raleigh, came down less and less. She had her hands full. Her second pregnancy, a full-time job, and to be honest, she and her father had been closer than she and I ever were. That Mustang just sat there in the garage, like a shrine I didn't want, but didn't have the heart to dismantle. But then the bills started stacking. Tom had life insurance, yes, but it wasn't the "you'll be fine forever" kind. It was the "this will tide you over for a few months" kind. And while I'm not drowning, a single salary in this economy with a mortgage is no joke. So I made the decision. I was going to sell the Mustang. It wasn't an easy call. Tom loved that car. He'd rebuilt it from the frame up over 10 years, sanding each panel, reupholstering the seats himself, tinkering with the engine on Sunday afternoons. But I needed to be practical. One Saturday, I pulled the car into the driveway, propped open the hood for photos, and started cleaning out the inside. The air was thick with that mix of leather, gasoline, and faint cigarette smoke, though Tom hadn't smoked in decades. I wiped down the dash, shook the floor mats, and then I opened the glove box. Inside, there was the usual: an old insurance card, a pair of cheap sunglasses, a tire pressure gauge. But behind all that, my fingers brushed something stiff and folded. It was wedged deep against the back wall. I pulled it out, thinking it was maybe a repair receipt. It wasn't. It was a photo. A small Polaroid, the edges curled from time. At first, my brain struggled to make sense of it. It was Tom, younger, maybe 10 years ago. He was sitting at some picnic table, his arm around a woman I didn't recognize. And that woman was holding a newborn baby. For a second, I thought, okay, maybe this was just a friend. Maybe it's someone from work. But then I saw Tom's hand, not resting casually, but cupped around her hip in a way no friend ever would. And the look on his face? It wasn't the look he gave me when Kelsey was born. It was softer, possessive, almost proud. My chest went cold, my ears rang. I could feel my heartbeat in my teeth. There was something scrawled on the back of the photo in Tom's handwriting. Our first summer, 2013. hour. I sat there in the driver's seat, the photo in my lap, staring out at the street. My neighbor's kids were riding bikes past the driveway, their laughter drifting into the air like none of this mattered. But to me, in that moment, it was like the ground had tilted. Tom and I had been together in 2013. Not just together, we were celebrating our 20th anniversary that year. I remember because we had taken a trip to Charleston. I'd worn this floral dress he liked, and he'd given me a silver bracelet with a tiny heart charm. So, where was the hell this picnic table? Who was this woman, and whose baby was that? I could have shoved the photo back in the glove box, pretended I hadn't seen it, sold the car, moved on. But there's something that happens when you're grieving. Your mind starts to rewind every memory, every fight, every business trip that ran late, and you start to see holes you didn't want to see before. And now, I couldn't unsee them. I spent the rest of the day in a fog, the photo tucked in my sweater pocket. I didn't even take the pictures for the sale listing. I just sat at the kitchen table, tracing the edge of that Polaroid, reading those 3 words on the back over and over. Our first summer. Later that night, I called Kelsey. I tried to keep my voice light, casual, but I could hear her multitasking, probably chopping vegetables while balancing her phone on her shoulder. "Hey, honey," I said. "I was cleaning out Dad's car today." "Mm-hmm," she said. "Finally gonna sell it?" "Yeah, but I found something." "What do you mean?" I hesitated. I wanted to ask if she knew, if maybe there was some secret she'd been keeping for her father all these years. But my throat tightened. Instead, I said, "Nothing, just some old photos." There was a pause on her end. "Huh. Well, Dad kept all kinds of junk in there. Don't overthink it, Wom." Her tone was dismissive, but something in it felt too quick, too rehearsed. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop thinking about the woman in the photo. She had this open smile, a softness in her eyes. And that baby? If the picture was from 2013, that child would be around 11 now, old enough to be in middle school, old enough to have his father's eyes. The thought made my stomach twist. And then a terrible realization hit me. If Tom had another child, then somewhere out there was a woman who had been living a parallel life to mine. Maybe she knew about me, maybe she didn't. Either way, I was going to find out. That was the moment the grief started to morph into something sharper, something that would keep me awake at night, sifting through bank statements, old emails, and every scrap of evidence I could find. Because if Tom Carter thought he could take this secret to the grave, he had no idea who he was married to. And I was about to make sure his legacy was remembered for what it truly was.
I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that woman's face. I saw her laughing at something Tom said, the way she leaned into him like she'd been doing it for years. And that baby? God, that baby. By sunrise, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my laptop open, a cup of coffee going cold beside me. The house was silent, except for the ticking of the wall clock. I typed and deleted search terms over and over. Tom Carter, Fayetteville. Tom Carter, North Carolina construction. Picnic grounds, 2013, North Carolina. Nothing. It's amazing how you can share a bed with someone for decades and still realize you barely know how to look for them in the world. So I decided to start small. I dug through the file cabinet in the den where Tom kept his old invoices and contracts. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. But then I found something. A faded receipt from a hardware store in Wilmington dated July 2013. We didn't live anywhere near Wilmington back then. It was 2 hours away. And that date was the exact week we'd supposedly been in Charleston for our anniversary trip. A memory flashed. Tom insisting he had to swing by the job site on our way back from Charleston, telling me to wait at the hotel until he returned. He'd been gone for hours, and when I asked about it later, he brushed me off with some story about a last-minute roofing issue. Now I was wondering, was Wilmington where she lived? That afternoon, I called my sister, Denise. She's the blunt one in the family, the one who always said Tom was too slick for his own good. When she picked up, I skipped the pleasantries. "Do you remember if Tom ever worked in Wilmington?" She was quiet for a moment. "Why?" "I found an old receipt from 2013. Her voice dropped. "Lyd, are we talking about before or after you found that picture?" My breath caught. "How do you know about the picture?" "I don't," she said quickly. "I'm just guessing. You found something. You sound like you're about to tear his ghost apart." That was Denise for you. No sugarcoating. I told her about the picture, about the woman, about the baby. She didn't gasp. She didn't say, "Oh my God." She just sighed. "Lyd, you know I always thought he was stepping out on you. He was too careful about his phone, too vague about his late nights." The way she said it, casual, like it was obvious, made my stomach twist. I asked her, "Why didn't you ever say anything?" She said because you were happy, or at least you wanted to look happy, and I wasn't going to be the one to light a match on your whole life unless you were ready to see it burn. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about what Denise said. Ready to see it burn. I pulled the photo back out and stared at the woman's face, zooming in on my phone to study every detail. She had a small, crescent-shaped scar on her chin. Her hair was sun-lightened at the ends, like she spent a lot of time outdoors. And then I noticed something I'd missed before. On the picnic table, next to Tom's arm, was a bottle of Cheerwine soda. But not just any bottle. It had the name of a small diner printed on it. Porter's Grill, Wrightsville Beach. I Googled it. Wrightsville Beach was right outside Wilmington. That afternoon, I called in sick. I told the school I had a migraine, but in reality, I was getting in my car and driving 2 hours east. It was hot that day, the kind of heat that makes your skin feel tight. When I pulled into the gravel lot beside Porter's Grill, it was nearly empty. The place looked exactly like you'd expect a beachside diner to look like. Weathered wood siding, sun-faded awning, the smell of fried shrimp drifting from the kitchen. I walked inside, the little bell above the door jingling. A woman behind the counter looked up from wiping menus. "Afternoon. Just you?" I nodded, sliding into a booth by the window. My hands were damp against the vinyl seat. When she came over with a glass of water, I took a breath and decided to risk it. "This is going to sound strange," I said, "but do you remember a man named Tom Carter? Tall, dark hair, maybe came here a lot about 10 years ago?" Her brow furrowed. Tom Carter. Then her eyes lit with recognition. "Oh, you mean Tommy. Yeah, he used to come in here all the time." Tommy. The familiarity in her tone made my stomach turn. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "He was seeing Jolene back then. Pretty blonde, worked over at the marina." Jolene. It was almost too cliché to be real. The waitress kept talking. "They had a little boy together. Cutest kid. Tommy was so proud. Used to bring him in here for pancakes on Sundays." My throat closed. "Do you know where she is now?" She shook her head. "Haven't seen her in years. Think she moved inland after the hurricane." I left a tip I couldn't afford and walked out into the blinding sun. My hands were trembling so hard I almost dropped my keys. It wasn't just an affair. It wasn't just a fling. It was a second life. A whole other family that he'd nurtured and cherished while I sat at home thinking he was working late to provide for us. The betrayal was so sharp. I felt physically sick. I pulled over at a rest stop and just sat in the car, my head on the steering wheel, gasping like I'd been punched. When I got home, I called Kelsey again. My voice was steady, but inside, I was shaking. "Do you know a woman named Jolene?" There was a pause. Too long. "Mom, where did you hear that name?" My stomach dropped. "So you do know her." She sighed. "Dad mentioned her a few times when I was younger, said she was a friend from out east who needed help with her kid." I almost laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. Help with her kid! That's one way to put it. "Mom, what's going on?" she asked me, her voice suddenly sharp with worry. I didn't answer. I couldn't, because if I said it out loud, if I told my daughter her father had another child her whole life, I didn't know if I'd be able to stop talking until every ugly truth came pouring out. That night, I sat in my living room with the photo on the coffee table, my laptop open again. I searched for Jolene, Wrightsville Beach Marina, until my eyes blurred. Finally, I found a grainy news article from 2017 about storm damage at a local dock. There she was, same hair, same scar, standing in front of a collapsed pier. The caption read, "Jolene Marks, dock manager, discusses repairs." Marks. That was her last name. And if she was still in North Carolina in 2017, maybe she wasn't as far away as I thought. I clicked on every related link, every property record, every Facebook profile that even remotely matched. Hours passed. My coffee went cold again. The house was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Then, there it was. A public post from 2 months ago, a birthday cake with 11 candles. The caption read, "Happy birthday to my amazing son, Caleb. You make me proud every single day." In the photo, Caleb was grinning at the camera. And I swear to you, he had Tom's eyes. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding. This wasn't just a suspicion anymore. It was fact, flesh and blood. Somewhere out there, there was a boy who had no idea his father had another family. And somewhere out there, Jolene was living with the comfort of knowing that she had been chosen, that Tom had built a second home with her while keeping me in the dark. But what she didn't know was that I was done being kept in the dark. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to send a message. I wasn't going to make a phone call. I was going to drive to her door and look her in the eyes when I told her who I was. Because if Tom thought he could die with this secret buried, he was wrong. Dead wrong.
I woke up before dawn the next morning, the kind of restless, brittle energy running through me that no amount of coffee could tame. The Polaroid was still on my nightstand. I picked it up, ran my thumb over Tom's face, then over hers. I wasn't afraid anymore. The grief had burned away, leaving something sharper, cleaner. I got in my car and drove. It was just after 9 when I pulled into the quiet suburban street, lined with modest ranch houses and maple trees. Her place had wind chimes on the porch and a red mailbox leaning slightly to one side. I sat there for a long moment, engine idling, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. Then I killed the engine, stepped out, and walked up the path. She opened the door before I even knocked, barefoot, wearing jeans and a faded t-shirt, and for a second neither of us spoke. Up close, the scar on her chin was more visible. Her hair was pulled into a loose braid, streaked with gray. Her eyes flickered over me with polite confusion. "Can I help you?" she asked. I took a breath. "My name is Lydia Carter. I was Tom Carter's wife." It was like dropping a stone in still water. I saw the ripple move across her face. She didn't gasp or slam the door. She just went still. "I know who you are," she said quietly. That knocked the wind out of me. "You knew about me?" Her jaw tightened. "Of course I did. He told you you were the wife he couldn't leave, the marriage that was practically over but too complicated to end. He said staying was better for his business, for his daughter." I laughed. I couldn't help it. It was sharp and ugly. "So you were the escape, the fun life." She flinched, but didn't deny it. I stepped closer. "Do you have any idea what it's like to bury your husband and then find out he had another family, another child?" Her eyes softened just a fraction. "I didn't know you didn't know. I thought—" She trailed off. "I thought he was honest with you about us." "Honest?" I repeated, almost choking on the word. Tom Carter couldn't be honest about the color of the sky. There was a noise from inside, a boy's voice calling, "Mom!" And then he appeared in the doorway behind her. Caleb, 11 years old, all knees and elbows, with hair the exact shade Tom had when I met him. Those same eyes, steady and curious. I felt my breath catch. Jolene glanced at him, then back at me. "Go get your backpack, honey. I'll be right there." He disappeared down the hall. "Why are you here?" she asked. I could have told her it was to understand, to get closure, to satisfy the gnawing need for the truth, but really it was more than that. "I'm here because you've been living with the comfort of thinking you were the chosen one, and I need you to know he lied to both of us. Every day, every year. And you let him." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "What do you want from me, Lydia?" I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, I don't want anything from you, but I thought you should know his will didn't mention you or Caleb, not a penny. He made sure all his accounts are in my name now." Her eyes widened just slightly. That landed. "Which means," I continued, "all those things he promised you, the safety net, the savings, the future you thought you had, it's gone. And it's going to stay gone." I turned to leave, but then paused at the bottom of her steps. "One more thing," I said without looking back. "You tell Caleb whatever you want about who his father was, but when he's old enough to ask, I'll tell him the truth. Every last bit of it." And then I walked away. I didn't cry in the car. I thought I might, but instead I drove home with the windows down, the August air whipping my hair around. For the first time in months, I felt later. Not happy, not yet, but steady. Over the next week, I boxed up the rest of Tom's things. I sold the Mustang to a collector in South Carolina for more than I expected, and instead of pouring that money into bills like I'd planned, I used part of it for something else. A trip. Kelsey and I went to Maine for a long weekend. We ate lobster rolls on the pier, walked along rocky beaches, and for the first time in years, she opened up to me. Halfway through a walk one evening, she said, "I always knew Dad wasn't perfect, Mom, but I didn't know how much you carried." I didn't tell her everything. Not yet. But I told her enough. And in the cool salt air, it felt like maybe we could build something honest between us, something Tom couldn't touch. The revenge wasn't in destroying Jolene's life. It wasn't even in making her face the truth. It was taking back control, closing the door on a man who thought he could script my life from beyond the grave. And when I signed the final title transfer for the Mustang, I felt like I had finally signed my way out of his shadow. It's been 6 months since that day on Jolene's porch. I repainted the living room. I've started hiking again on Saturdays. I planted tomatoes in the backyard. Sometimes when I catch myself smiling at something small, a clean breeze, a good meal, a quiet night, I think about how Tom never believed I'd thrive without him. Turns out, he was wrong about that too. You can't always choose the way people betray you, but you can choose the way you rise afterward. And sometimes the sweetest justice is simply living well, without the person who thought you couldn't. Sometimes the best revenge isn't burning their life down. It's walking away and building a better one of your own. If you've ever uncovered a secret that changed everything, I'd love to hear your story. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more true tales of justice and redemption, and share your own in the comments below, because sometimes the truth is the most powerful weapon we have.